Welcome, everybody, to On This Day on the Gruely Truth Sports Network, and I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Today we're going to talk about March 14th, 1983. That's the day the North Carolina State Wolfpack beat the heavily favored Virginia Cavaliers, led by 7'4" center Ralph Sampson, to win the ACC Tournament championship. And if you look at the records of these teams coming in, the talent and the history, it seemed obvious North Carolina State had no business winning the 30th annual Atlantic Coast Conference basketball tournament. Obviously, the Wolfpack didn't pay attention to any of that. And a day after upsetting the defending national champions and conference champions North Carolina in the semifinals, North Carolina State beat Virginia, the nation's second-ranked team, 81-78 in the final. The outcome surprised most of the capacity crowd of almost 17,000 in the Omni. It certainly surprised Virginia, an 8.5-point favorite here at that tournament, one of the favorites in the NCAA tournament, which would start a week later. And by winning, NC State qualified automatically for the 52-team competition. 3 hours after the final ended, Virginia and North Carolina were chosen for at-large bids in the tournament. So was Maryland, which was eliminated in the first round by Georgia Tech at the Omni. Now, North Carolina State had a difficult road to reach the final, beating Wake Forest by a point, beating North Carolina in a great game by 7 in overtime. Meanwhile, Virginia routed the competition. They beat Mike Krzyzewski and the Duke Blue Devils by 43 points, and Georgia Tech by 29. But North Carolina State had a feisty young coach in 37-year-old Jim Valvano. It had three starting seniors in Sidney Lowe, Derek Wittenberg, and Thurl Bailey. And they took the coach's challenge to accept leadership, and they had a family-type atmosphere going into this game. And the family had a great day on this game, as the North Carolina State Wolfpack took the lead for good at 67-65 with 7 minutes and 2 seconds remaining and held off Virginia's strong finish. Thurl Bailey scored 24 points and kept Ralph Sampson, Virginia's 7'4" All-American center, in check, despite Sampson's 24 points and 12 rebounds. Sampson only had 6 points in the second half and was stripped of the ball as he was going up for a basket with 30 seconds to play. Now, Virginia trailed at the time of that strip 78-75. And after Terry Gannon took the ball away from Sampson, Bailey hit a free throw for a 4-point lead. Othell Wilson cut the deficit to 79-78 with 20 seconds left on a 3-point shot, which the ACC Tournament this year, or that year, was using the experimental 3-point line, which was actually, if I remember right, 17 foot 9 inches. And Wittenberg comes back, hits 2 more free throws with 6 seconds remaining. And the Wolfpack guards were the difference in this game, as they really excelled and played at a high level. Now, most of North Carolina's scoring was handled by those guards. Sidney Lowe, 18 points, Derek Wittenberg, 15, and Terry Gannon with 12. Gannon made 4 of 6 3-point field goal attempts, Lowe 4 of 7, and Lowe was named the tournament's outstanding player. Virginia star Jim Miller started at forward, scored 16 points, and he replaced Tim Mullen, a sophomore from Ridgewood High School, who sprained a ligament in the right knee against North Carolina. Now, pending a medical examination, they didn't know if he'd be able to play in the tournament, and he ended up not. Now, the interesting theory here is that Jim Miller and Othell Wilson actually led Virginia the next year to the Final Four as they upset Arkansas, and then they beat the Indiana Hoosiers led by Bob Knight, who had upset North Carolina and Michael Jordan in the Sweet 16. That Virginia team actually went on to the Final Four and lost in, I believe, double overtime, 49-47 to the Houston Cougars in 5 slamma jamma. So when you look at Virginia, they got the 7'4" Sampson. The first year in 1980, they beat Minnesota and Kevin McHale in the NIT finals, which I know everybody turns up their nose at winning the NIT, but at the time, the NIT was a big deal. Well, not a big deal, but it was a lot bigger than it was now because you had, 16 less teams, and there were some good quality teams in there like Minnesota. And when we look back, 1981, they make it to the Final Four with Ralph Sampson, but they lose to North Carolina. 1982, they come up short in the Sweet 16 to the University of Alabama, Birmingham. And Ralph Sampson could have been the first-round pick in the draft, and he chose to come back for his fourth year. And it just didn't work out. And the ACC championship game started horribly for Virginia and Sampson. Sampson opened the scoring with a free throw, but then Valvano's tough Wolfpack raced to a 12-1 lead. In that stretch, Sidney Lowe twice stole the ball and dribbled down the court and scored. Meanwhile, Sampson drove for the basket, missed his shot, then traveled. Then he threw the ball away. Then he missed a turnaround jumper. Virginia turned the ball over 5 times in the first few minutes of the game. Now, Virginia recovered and quickly scored 9 straight points, and it kind of seemed inevitable from what I remember watching the game that the Cavs would just pull away. And besides, NC State often used 3 guards to provide speed, so Sampson was guarded one-on-one and should have had many scoring opportunities, which he did, but he was limited by Thurl Bailey. And still, Sampson did not bury the Wolfpack. As we said, Thurl Bailey played great. Sampson didn't even score in the last 7:48 of the first half. He missed 3 shots. He had the ball stripped from him once, and twice saw passes intercepted before they reached him. "You can never stop Sampson," said Bailey. "You try to control him." North Carolina State was helped by a technical foul against Jim Larinaga, a Virginia assistant coach, with 5:11 remaining in the game. Wittenberg made both free throws. North Carolina State gained possession, and Wittenberg sank a 16-foot off-balance jumper just inside the three-point line. That 4-point surge is where Virginia lost the game. NC State led 75-66 and held on from there. Virginia did close the deficit to 1, as we said, on Othell Wilson's 3-point field goal, but then Wittenberg hits a couple free throws. Sampson, after the game, said, "I think we lost it." And Sampson was there for 4 years as the greatest recruit. And I remember him coming out of high school. He was on the front page of Sports Illustrated. He never got it done there. He never won one in ACC tournament, conference tournament, in his 4 years at Virginia. But he actually had the gall to say, "I think we lost it. I don't think they beat us." Now, we could buy that. But 2 weeks later, in the regional finals in the NCAA tournament, Sampson failed again against North Carolina State. North Carolina squeaked out a close, hard-fought victory to go on to the Final Four, and then dance into history as one of the greatest stories in March Madness history. So today, we were talking about March the 14th, 1983, and the North Carolina State Wolfpack's amazing victory over Ralph Sampson and the Virginia Cavaliers. I want to remind everybody you can follow us at Grueling Truth. You can hear all of our shows wherever podcasts are played. So for now, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.